So Destiny takes place on a handful of planets with an open world-like design. And ever since I started playing Destiny back in 2014, I asked the question, what's the point? Because the open worlds or patrol areas suck. The problem is that you go there to do patrols, but those are so boring. Most people don't do patrols for fun, they do them for bounties and other rewards. An open world should be something that you go into for fun, but there's nothing fun to do in Destiny's open worlds. They're basically just areas to go to grind for more rewards. And that's the biggest problem with Destiny. It feels like Bungie's main objective isn't to get you to enjoy what you're doing as much as possible, it's just to squeeze out as much playtime from you as possible. But I digress, back to the open world. Destiny's open worlds suck, but what makes an open world good? A lot of things, but one thing for sure is that in a good open world game, you don't need missions, quests, objectives, or rewards to have fun. Your game should of course have these things, but the players shouldn't need them to have fun. In a good open world game, I can just spawn in with no idea of what I'm gonna do or no plan of what to do, but I can still have fun. And that's the reason why I almost always keep GTA 5 installed on my gaming PC. Its open world isn't perfect, but most of the time when I play, I just spawn in and get right into some action. I might go steal a crappy car, modify it, and then take it on a street race. I might steal a big truck or a bus and use it as a roadblock and then sprinkle C4 around and cause a massive explosion when enough cars pile up. I might go grab a jet and put on Spotify so that I can play Danger Zone while flying around doing tricks, or at least attempting to do tricks and then crashing. I might spawn in as Trevor and go on one of those classic GTA killing sprees with some rock and roll in the background. I mean, honestly, my favorite thing to do is just to listen to the Doors and go around doing random stuff. GTA 5's open world is immersive. You really feel like you're in Los Santos. You really feel like you're in this big city because you've got all of these cars driving around and you got all of these people walking around in the street. So it really does feel like a big city. Destiny's open worlds really aren't all that immersive, mostly because it all feels so fake. You'll see the same enemies spawn in the same locations and fight each other again and again. On the Dreadnought, every time you spawn in, you'll see the Cabal fighting the Hive. On Mars, you'll see the Cabal fighting the Vex, and it's the same for every planet. There's always these boring, lifeless, scripted fights that you see on every planet, and the best part about it is if you kill all the enemies in that area, they'll just respawn and start fighting all over again. And look, to be clear, I'm not asking for Destiny 2's open world to be as massive and detailed as GTA 5's. I understand that Destiny is a different game, and there's more to it than just the open world, whereas with GTA 5, the open world is pretty much the game. But just because the open world plays a smaller role in Destiny doesn't mean that it shouldn't be improved. Nothing cool or exciting happens in Destiny's open worlds, and that's partially because everything's on a timer and everything is on repeat. There's a limited amount of things that can happen in a given area, and if you patrol that area just a few times, you'll see them all. And after that, you'll know exactly where those enemies are gonna spawn, you know exactly where the two enemy factions are gonna start their little fight, and you'll see the one or two public events that happen in that area. And after a few times, seeing those things aren't interesting, cool, or fun. And you know why? Because it probably wasn't even that fun the first time. Now, I'm not saying that you can't have fun in Destiny's patrol areas, but I am saying that you can't have that much fun in the open world because there's just not that much to do in the way of interesting activities. Now, in a game like Horizon Zero Dawn, there's lots of fun to be had in the open world. There's so many machine dinosaurs that you can go out and hunt, and the combat allows you to change up your playstyle and use different tactics to fight. You can blow off a T-Rex's gun and pick it up and use that weapon against it. You can use weapons that have chilling effects so that your other attacks do more damage. You can set up traps. You can corrupt other machines to fight on your side, and you can use electrically charged weapons to shock your enemies too. There's tons of different machines to fight, and there's tons of different ways to fight. I only listed a few just now. Thus, there's tons of things to do in the open world. Plus, if you're tired of fighting machines, you can go take over a bandit camp and fight humans instead. Juxtapose that with Destiny, and you can see a huge problem, because there just isn't much variety. Sure, there's different factions, but that doesn't change the gameplay all that much, because each faction has enemies that shoot, some that melee, and some with armor. Regardless of what faction you're fighting, you pretty much fight the same exact way. You try not to get shot, and you shoot the bad guys in their crit spot. The Fallen and the Hive might be different factions, but honestly, the biggest difference between them is cosmetic. I mean, think about the difference between fighting a Dreg and an Acolyte. There really isn't any. They'll both stand there and shoot at you, and both of them will get one-shotted to the head with a hand cannon. Now, to be clear, every open world game seems to get boring over time, especially once you finish the game. With a game like Horizon Zero Dawn, yeah, at some point into the game, the open world lost its luster. With GTA 5, there's a lot of things that you can do to have fun, but once you do those things, that world can also lose its luster too. But the difference is, with a game like Destiny, the open world never had any luster in the first place. And that's because Bungie forgot to put fun things to do in the open world. What do you do in Destiny's open world? Go fight Randall the Vandal or Greg the Dreg? Wow, so much fun. There aren't any fun enemies to fight like there are in Horizon Zero Dawn, which is crazy because Destiny is a sci-fi game. Shouldn't there be some cool ass creatures to fight in the open world? They could totally put some interesting enemies to fight in the open world, but nope, just fight the same minions over and over again. I mean, think about it. You fight the same enemies from the story missions and the strikes, which is fine to an extent because those factions need to be present in the open world. I understand that. But wouldn't it be cool if there were just some random creatures or monsters that were exclusive to the open world? I think that'd be a great addition to Destiny because fighting dregs, vandals, acolytes, and whatever the Vex minions are called is pretty damn boring. Honestly, fighting these enemies is only a small step above fighting zombies. I mean, seriously, watch me fight enemies in Horizon Zero Dawn's open world, and then watch me fight some enemies in Destiny's open world.
Guardian, we've got a cluster of troops nearby. We can't let them mass in numbers. We'll clear them out.
Now I know there's no comparison because Horizon Zero Dawn has machine dinosaurs with laser beams and shit, but really, whose fault is that? What's stopping Bungie from having interesting and cool enemies to fight? Isn't it their fault that the enemies we fight are whack as fuck? And it's not just the enemies either, it's the Guardians too. Compare Destiny to something like Far Cry. People love Far Cry 3 and 4 because there's so many different options when it comes to the combat. There's a ton of sandbox in Far Cry when there's barely any at all in Destiny. In Far Cry 4, when you're going to take over an enemy camp, there's tons of different ways to do it. You can do it stealthy, you can use your camera to tag all the enemies, then use takedowns, throwing knives, your bow, or any silenced weapon to take out all the enemies without ever getting detected. Or you can fly in on a janky ass makeshift helicopter and shoot your grenade launcher from the sky, then parachute down and take out the rest of the bad guys. You can drive a jeep straight into the enemy camp loaded up with C4, bail out, and then detonate it to cause a big explosion and take out a few of the guys. And those are just a few examples. But that's why Ubisoft gets away with putting in so much repetition in the Far Cry games. I mean, think about it. For the whole game, you're gonna be killing bad guys in missions and enemy camps, and that's pretty much it. But one of the reasons why it doesn't get boring is all of the different ways that you can switch up your playstyle. In Far Cry, you have so many different options when it comes to weapons that each time you repeat the task of killing bad guys, it can be different in one way or another. But that's not really the case with Destiny. Sure, some of the different weapons can offer different playstyles, but for the most part in Destiny, whether you're in a strike, mission, or a patrol, you just shoot the bad guys before they shoot you. And there's not much thought in that. There's not much planning that goes into most of the fights. The most thinking that you'll do is deciding what elements you want to bring into that fight, and which subclass you feel like using. And in Destiny's open world, it feels like your decisions really don't matter. Who cares what weapons you choose to patrol with? The enemies will die super quickly either way, so does your decision really matter that much? Now to be fair, this is a problem all across Destiny, and not just with the open world, but if Guardians had more options for their playstyle, fighting enemies in the open worlds would be a lot more fun. Another problem with Destiny's open world is that the player has to react to the open world, but the open world doesn't react to the player. Let me explain what I mean by that. One reason why GTA 5's open world is so fun to play in happen is because the world reacts to you. Obviously, if you're going around killing people, the cops are gonna come after you. And the more cops that you kill, the more cops will come after you. But it's little things too. If you so much as bump into somebody while you're walking or running, they're gonna react to you. If you just bump someone, they'll probably react by getting angry and saying something like, "Excuse you." But if you're running and you bump into someone, they'll react in a few different ways when they fall to the floor. Some of them will get scared and just run away. Some of them will have a fist fight with you right then and there. And some of them will pull out a gun and shoot you. I mean, if you follow a person around, when they notice, they'll get visibly nervous. Then they'll start walking faster, and eventually they'll run from you. Now look, I'm not saying that I want to stalk Hank the Shank all the way home. What I'm saying is I want Destiny's open worlds to start reacting to the player. I want my actions to have an effect on what's happening in the world. I want to feel like what I do actually matters. Because right now, it's the total opposite. Nothing you do in the open world really matters right now. Sure, you can choose whether or not to take part in a public event, but those events happen with or without you. They spawn on a timer, whether someone's there to play it or not. And that has such a small effect on the open world, even if you do take part in it. What happens? All the bad guys from that event die? Big deal. 2 seconds later, all the normal enemies are gonna spawn in their usual location anyways, and the enemies from that public event will just disappear even if you didn't kill them. So what's really the difference? Think about how much more fun patrols would be if Destiny's open worlds took notice of the player. What if after killing a certain amount of enemies, that faction sends in reinforcements to come and kill you? And these enemies could be more challenging. They could have armor or shields and be a bit more aggressive. And if you kill enough of them, they could send in tougher reinforcements for you. So if you killed enough enemies, you'd have a pretty intense fight on your hands. And you know, if you beat all of the reinforcements, you can get some extra loot or something. I think a basic addition like that would go a long way in improving Destiny's patrols. Destiny's open worlds thus far have been pretty darn dead, but it doesn't have to be that way. With a few simple design choices here and there, Destiny's open world can be a lot more fun. And I have a few more suggestions that I want to share with you guys. First of all, we need tools. I really don't know how or why Bungie developers haven't added this to the open world yet, when it's such an obviously easy way to make the open worlds more fun. GTA 5, or GTA in general, is a fantastic example of what can happen when you give your players tools or toys to play with. You don't have to hold our hand and tell us what to do, just put the toys in the sandbox and we'll figure it out ourselves. In Grand Theft Auto, you have access to tons of tools, most commonly vehicles. A car in GTA 5 is like a Swiss Army knife. It can be used for so many different purposes. Plus you have things like the attack helicopter, the military jet, the tanks, and tanks. I mean, someone please explain to me why there aren't tanks in Destiny's open worlds. Wouldn't it be fun to be able to drive around a tank killing enemies? Of course it would. Tanks are always fun, and it would be a great way to switch things up. I think that's one of Destiny's biggest problems, is that it never switches things up. It's always the same mode, shoot the bad guys with your gun and don't die. Vehicular combat would be a great way to switch things up, and it would of course be a lot of fun to go ham on a group of enemies with your tank. And it doesn't just have to be tanks. Give us other vehicles that we can use to get around and fight enemies. I mean, look at Halo. Think about how many cool vehicles are in that game. What if we had some of those in Destiny? Wouldn't it be dope if we had things like the Wraith or the Banshee? And I would love to see a vehicle like the Warthog where you have one guy driving and then another one on the machine gun shooting the bad guys. Isn't it crazy that a game that's so focused on cooperative play doesn't have vehicles like this? And I mean, they don't just have to copy from other games, they can make their own unique vehicles that fit into the Destiny universe. And you know, the funny thing is that some of these vehicles are already in the game. The game already has things like tanks and pikes, but for some reason they aren't in the open worlds. And I know there's this one public event on the moon where a couple of vandals come riding through on pikes, but I mean, how often does that even happen? But you know, I suspect that there are a few reasons why they don't have tanks and pikes readily available in Destiny's open worlds. And the main reason is probably that the open world is already so damn easy in terms of difficulty that they're afraid of how much of a joke it would be if they put these vehicles in the open world. The enemies as they are right now would be totally incapable of fighting back. And that's the second thing that I wish Bungie would add to the open world: challenge. Because right now the open world poses pretty much no challenge, especially if you're at a decent light level. People would take the open world a lot more seriously if the open world was more challenging. And I don't mean just turn the enemies into bullet sponges, I'm saying make the AI smarter. Most of the time people spawn into the world and then hop on their Sparrow and drive straight past all the enemies and just go directly to the area that they want. Hell, you don't even need your Sparrow most of the time. You can literally just run past most of the enemies in the open world. I mean, that's what everyone does on the Dreadnought, and everyone knows that they can do that because there's that invisible line that enemies won't cross, so they can't chase you. They'll just stay put in their little area. But wouldn't it be cool if in the next game, when you got spotted by some Fallen and you decide to pull your Sparrow out of your butt to run away, the Vandals and Dregs don't just stand there and shoot at you as you drive past them. They hop on their pikes and they start chasing you, and then they start shooting at you with their pikes. And then upgradable Sparrows would actually make sense, because Sparrows that could withstand more damage would be a lot more useful. But anyways, while the Fallen are shooting at you, if you decide to stay on your Sparrow, you'd have to take evasive maneuvers to dodge their fire. Maybe you could pull the E-brake and do a power slide around the enemies so that you're now behind them. And then they could make it like Far Cry 4, where if you have a one-handed weapon, you can pull it out while driving a vehicle. So you could pull out your hand cannon or your sidearm, and you can kill the Fallen from behind. Plus, that would give players a good incentive to actually kill the enemies so that you can take their vehicles. And that would be nice too, wouldn't it? To actually have immediate incentive to kill enemies in patrol instead of just run past them. Because right now, what's the point in killing enemies in the open world? Chances are you won't get anything valuable, and it's pretty damn boring. But anyways, back to the challenge thing. It would be cool to have gangs of enemies just randomly patrolling the open world looking for guardians. That would change things up and make it feel like not everything in this open world is on a timer. It would give the open world some life, some spontaneity that it desperately needs. Also, it'd be nice if in some areas there was some bigger groups of enemies, especially if they add in vehicles. With vehicles, we're definitely gonna need larger groups of enemies to fight against, not, just 5 or 6 little minions. And maybe in some areas you could have massive fights taking place between enemy factions, not like how it is right now. Right now you'll see 2 groups of enemies fighting, but it's really just a few guys going pew pew at each other. I mean, if you ever just sit there and watch the 2 factions fight each other, it's a pretty lame ass fight. If the fights were bigger and more intense, they'd be a lot more immersive and believable. It would actually make you feel like you're on this planet that's being fought over by super powerful enemy armies. Also, it'd be cool if there were bosses or just big badass enemies to fight in certain areas. Kinda like how in Kingdom Hearts you had Sephiroth as an open world boss. I would like to see some bosses like that in Destiny's open worlds, scattered around the map in their own little areas. Also, large enemy bases filled with tons of enemies to take out would be a lot of fun. As it is right now, if you go into the buildings in Destiny's open worlds, there's usually not too many enemies to fight in there. There might be a group of 5 and a group of 6 over there, but nothing really interesting. It's just you kill them in a couple of seconds and then it's over with. I would like it if when you go into these buildings, you had a lot of enemies to fight against to make it feel like the open world was populated with enemies, and the open world would feel more alive and it wouldn't feel so damn dead like it is right now. I just hate how so many areas in Destiny's open world are just devoid of anything interesting to do. And another thing, Bungie, if you're gonna go with the same old system where after you kill a group of enemies, a group respawns after a certain amount of time, make it so that there's several different combinations of enemies. Let's say the first time you spawn 4 Dregs, 3 Vandals, 3 Shanks, and a Captain. Next time, spawn 4 Vandals, 5 Dregs, 6 Shanks, and 3 Servitors. And then have a different set of enemies spawn after that, and so on and so forth. Hell, make it a random composition every time if that's possible. That would make it so that the open world feels alive and dynamic. Right now, Destiny's open world feel very static. Not much changes, or not much is different every time you drop into patrol. Now, these are just a few suggestions. There's tons of stuff they could do to make the open world more fun. I just hope that they do something. Anything really. I don't want Destiny 2 to be Destiny 1 DLC. I want Destiny to evolve and to become better. Now, of course, I'm not gonna get my hopes up, and I'm fully expecting Destiny 2 to be Destiny 1 DLC, but hey, I might as well put my 2 cents out there. But that's it for this one. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to worship me above all gods, tattoo my name across your forehead, and sacrifice a goldfish in my name. I'll talk to you guys later though. Over, man. Out.